Hi, everybody. This is David Rocco Ficini, and you're listening to the Mo Stop Mo podcast. In today's episode, I interviewed Terry Ibele. Terry's a stop-motion animator from Toronto, Canada, but you might know him best as the host of the Animation Industry Podcast. I first became aware of Terry's work when he applied to the Mo Stop Motion Shorts Fest with his short film, The Silly Duck Wizard. It's a great short film, but unfortunately it was a little too short for the Mo Stop Mo Festival. The Silly Duck Wizard, however, has gone on to garner a lot of acclaim in the stop motion community. It's been featured on the DragonFrame Blog, Animation World Network, Stop Motion Magazine, and just won Best Youth Film at the Stop Motion Montreal Film Festival. Terry's career trajectory is very interesting in that he has recently left a career in business and marketing to switch gears and follow his passion of stop motion animation. I feel like a lot of his effort and his ambition is informed by his past career and his passion for animation. So sit back and I hope you enjoy this interview I have with Terry Ibele. Okay. So Terry, thank you for letting me now interview you.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me interview you first.
Like, it's not a competition. Okay. All right. You got me first. Fine. Now it's interesting because we often will showcase professionals with a substantial amount of experience under their belt for Mo Stop Mo, and industry experience. And in your case, I wanted to interview you for a few reasons. First off, looking at your animation, I want to ask you questions about your story process.
Okay.
Secondly, as a student, I feel like you do have a wealth of background about business and your career and whatnot before you became an animation student.
Yeah.
And then third is that you are a very, what I've seen, pretty prolific as a student. You are like doing a podcast, which you are, how many episodes deep are you into your podcast?
I just published the 73rd episode. Yes. Tuesday. Yeah.
And so you're a full-time student?
Yeah.
Or before?
Well, it's summer right now, so that, classes are out, but otherwise, yes.
Okay.
I'm going into my third year.
It's a 4-year program, or?
Yeah, it's a 4-year animation degree.
This is a BA?
Yep, a BA in animation from Sheridan College.
Yeah.
And next year in the summer, I'll have to do a co-op, which will be interesting, or an internship or whatever you call it down there. I know that some people, there's like a co-op or internship, one of them isn't paid, but it has to be a paid internship. I don't know your wording on those things, but.
Well, I think they started abolishing the unpaid internship in the States because everyone was doing it and no one was paying. Yeah. It became a big deal.
Getting all this free work.
So yeah, I've never really heard the co-op, but it sounds like a similar thing. Is that a paid process or is that?
See, that's the thing. It's like a co-op and internship are interchangeable to me. So, but if I mention one, then somebody's always like, what is that? So just thought I'd say both. But yeah, it's basically you work at a studio for the summer and they pay you and you get experience. Mm-hmm. So an internship, I guess. Got
it. So as a student, you're going into your third year. I'm sorry.
Yes, going into third year.
So I find you really interesting because you're really producing great animation. You're covering kind of the animation industry in your podcast, but it sounds like you really have your heart in stop motion. I don't know if that's the case. I've seen things on your Instagram and on your site and everything that, you showcase both, but it seems like you lean towards stop motion. So before we get into all of that, I want to go way back and tell me, first off, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Ibele?
Ibele. Like I and Bell. It's pretty phonetic.
Okay.
There's actually a small town in, I think, Nigeria that's called Ibele. So sometimes people think I'm from there if they don't meet me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like when you read it together, you could read it as terrible.
I always thought of starting a company named Terrible Products or something like that would be a play on my name, and it would probably make no sales because he would buy terrible products. But I thought it was funny.
I think the humor of it and self-defamation, it goes a long way. So
yeah, if I open an animation studio, it'll be terrible animation studio.
I think that'd be a great name.
Nobody would hire us. Have you heard of that terrible animation studio? They make great animation.
They wouldn't hire you until they saw your work, which is great, I think. So how do you get inspired? What inspired you to get into animation? Was it early on in your life, or did this become later on in life?
To get into animation, like seriously in the animation industry,
Or should I ask you, like, what started your love of animation?
Way back when I was, I don't know, I've always just grown up drawing and doodling and making little flip books. And then when my brother and I discovered my grandfather's camcorder after cleaning out his apartment after he passed, we discovered that you could like take one frame of something and then it would rewind 2 frames, and you could take another frame and it would rewind 2 frames, take another frame. So we would make these stop motion little Lego movies, but we had to conceptualize them backwards because this camcorder would rewind 2 frames every time you took a frame. So we'd animate everything backwards, and then when we played it back, it would be forwards, 1 frame at a time. So we were always just kind of, my brother and I were always just kind of like doodling around on like MS Paint and Corel Draw. And then when we discovered this camcorder, that kind of changed things for me, because I was like, oh, I can finally put all this crafting skills that I love to like make stuff with my hands to use. So from there, I just experimented. And then when I was in high school, there was this film competition called the Charlie Awards that was like this regional film competition for all the high schools. And I wanted to enter it. So I bought a better camcorder, I guess. It was like 2004. So the best camcorder at the time, I think it was like $250, and it was like all of my money. And I made this little film and entered it and ended up coming in the top 3 of the region. And that kind of inspired me to keep telling little stories with stop motion. And I made one every year, entered every year, and won the next 2 years. And then that's where my stop motion love comes from, really.
And you grew up where again?
In Waterloo, which is a small town near Toronto, I guess you could say.
Okay.
It's about an hour and a half away.
So you had this option with this camera to do animation, but you started doing stop motion. Did you also do other types of animation in front of that camera? Try to get a...
Yeah. Well, I did 2D with Corel Draw, but I just found that I sucked so bad at 2D animation that I just stopped because stop motion was easier, I guess, for me. And then my brother at the time was learning CG animation, so I thought I would learn that too. And I would make little animations in that too. But my brother, that ended up becoming his thing. He actually works as a professional CG animator now. But he was just so good that I was, I guess, uninspired. I was like, there's no way I can ever catch up to him, because he would just spend all day figuring out 3D Studio Max to make these insane animations. So I don't know if it was like envy or jealousy or whatever, or spite, but I was like, stop motion's my thing now. So then I would just ham it on the stop motion productions and make these giant sets out of like paper mache and clay and everything. And yeah.
So is this your brother? How old is your brother? Or like, what's the age?
He's a year and a half older than me. So we're pretty close in age.
Okay. And so it sounded like you started going off on your own and doing some stop motion stuff, like kind of making your own mark.
Yeah. In my bedroom, I was doing stop motion. In his bedroom, he was doing CG.
Okay. And is it just the 2 of you guys, siblings?
We have a younger sister, but she's not in animation at all.
Okay. She's the sane one.
Yeah, right.
So you're creating animation with your camera. You're setting your own path for stop motion to a degree. And is this before or after, like, you decide at one point that you're going to go to business school, correct?
Yeah. So the gist of the story is my last year of high school, I made this 10-minute stop motion film, and I won the film festival. And one of the judges who was working at an animation studio at the time and was also doing stop motion was like, oh my gosh, hey, you do stop motion, like come and visit my studio and like we'll chat and everything. So he was working at a studio in Toronto, which I don't think is around anymore. And so I like got on the bus and came to Toronto, and I made connections with all the like animation studios here, and I went and toured them all on the same day and like went around and had a great time. But the story was that stop motion was not really a thing anymore. This was 2000 and, oh boy, 2007-ish. And this, like, I went to one studio and they're like, wow, we're doing stop motion. I got to see a stop motion production, which was great. But they're like, we do one of these maybe every 6 months, and it's like for 2 weeks. So if you end up doing stop motion, we'll hire you for 2 weeks every 6 months. And that really scared me because I wanted to be on my own and kind of like make a living. And I don't know, it was just kind of really discouraging for me. So I made a mental block that I was never going to do stop motion or animation again. And I went to business school, which I thought was a much safer and more stable path for my career. And so I went to business school, got a degree, and then I started working in marketing in downtown Toronto at a vitamin company. If you're in Canada, you might have heard of Jameson Vitamins. So I was in their head office. And then after that, I worked for a software company for 3 years. So in total, I was working professionally for about 7 years before I decided to switch up things and come back to my roots in animation. But you asked me before my love for stop motion, and I actually, even when I decided to do animation, I wasn't even thinking of stop motion. I had like this huge wall up because I just didn't think it was viable, especially in Canada. There was nobody doing it. But I went and toured an animation studio, and it was amazing. There was like 150 people working there, just like on background design and like character animation and stuff. And so that kind of really opened my eyes to the animation industry here in Toronto, which is mostly CG and 2D. And I based my decision to go to animation school off of talking with as many people in the industry as I could. And pretty much everybody saying you need to study professionally if you want to like catch up to an entry-level standard. And then Sheridan is a really good school to do that. And a lot of people were Sheridan grads. So I was like, all right, so I'm going to get into 2D, which was my dream at the time. But stop motion just can't get away from me. So,
and right?
Yeah.
So what was the process of then getting into Sheridan? I mean, this is a big life change.
Yeah.
This is kind of like a reconciliation with yourself. You're denying yourself of something for a very long time. I mean, I don't know how actively you were denying. Was the marketing creative for you?
Yeah, the market, I really enjoyed my career. It was really hard to come out of that because it did fulfill a lot for me. In my last career, I was the head of SEO for the software company. It involved a lot of writing and like marketing and making videos and stuff like that. So it was very creative still, but it wasn't, I guess the story for that is I hadn't drawn or done anything really creative in years. And my brother for Christmas in 2017 was like, listen, all I want for you for Christmas this year is for you to do those old doodles you used to do in like high school and like frame it for me. So I really didn't want to because I was like, this is dumb. This is like animation again. And I don't want to do that. But I did it for him. And then through that process, I rediscovered that I liked drawing and coming up with little stories and stuff. And through that process, I actually started a 365-day comic for Instagram that I watercolored every day for 365 days. And through that process, I ended up talking with people, and that's where the studio, I toured there. And that really helped me realize that I do have this desire and need to do something that I find creatively fulfilling versus a business career, which was still good, but I found myself waking up at like 5 a.m. in the morning to work on this comic, and then getting ready for work, going to work, and then coming home, and like sometimes staying up just till midnight, still working on this comic, coming up with a storyline, watercoloring and stuff like that. And through that process, I really finally admitted to myself that maybe I should be doing something more creatively fulfilling with my career if I'm going to be working for the next 40 years anyways.
Right.
So that's, I remember I had a moment where I had come back from the studio, and for a while there were all these people telling me I should do animation. And I had a moment where I just like sat on the couch, and it was such a weird moment of clarity of like my whole life, all the creative things I'd done, all the influences that I'd seen, all the people telling me I should do something creative, just kind of all came to me at once. And it felt like I had unraveled all these mental barriers that had held me away from doing that so that I could pursue the more stable business lifestyle. And I actually just broke down crying because I had finally said yes to myself of always saying no for years, and in terms of pursuing something that I really wanted to do. So it was a really interesting emotional moment. And even though it's been, I guess, 2 years since I made that decision, it's still hard to believe in myself. But because I had broken down all those barriers and those walls once, it's like a reference point in my mind that I can do this. So yeah, I'm going forward with animation, storytelling.
So, I mean, I think that's such a great story. You know, I feel I have an uncle who's an attorney, and when I was getting into film school, he said to me, and, you know, he wasn't old, but, you know, he was set in his practice in Chicago, and he knew I was going to film school and I was making shorts, and he was just saying, I've always just wanted to be in film somehow. And I find it interesting that there's a promise of security. It's like, I kind of attribute this more to like Western civilization, that we trade comfort for happiness.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were successful and comfortable, but you were just like, your brother kind of reintroduced you, or like kind of just nudged you a little bit. And then once you got your hands dirty, you discovered, I like getting my hands dirty, and I can't get away from it, huh?
Well, yeah. And from that, I see that kind of as the instigating moment, but there was still almost 2 years before I made that decision between that time. And like, it was a tiny moment when he asked me to do that, but that small little ball started rolling until it snowballed into something bigger, because I don't know why I kept agreeing to myself that I would keep doing this comic for 365 days in a row. Originally, it was, I'm going to do this for a week. And then my friend asked me to like paint her a picture of a mouse village as part of the comic. And that took a while. And in the meantime, I was like, okay, well, I'll keep publishing this thing every day. And then I think I published that on like 30 days. I was like, yeah, I hit a month. Let's see if I can do 2 months. And then 2 months turned into 6 months. And then when I hit 6 months, I was like, let's do a whole year. I don't know why I kept doing that to myself, but there was something inside me that was just pushing me to keep the ball rolling, I guess. And so eventually, you know, the ball just hasn't stopped. It just got bigger and bigger. It went from literally drawing stick figures. These doodles were, the character my brother wanted me to draw was an egg that has like a 2-dot eyes and a face and stick figure arms and legs. Like, you can look it up on my Instagram if you scroll down far enough. But it's literally a stick figure dude. And now that's spiraled into me doing full stop motion productions and like going to school and spending thousands on tuition.
Yeah. Well.
And quitting my job and all these other things.
Do you regret any of it?
No. And sometimes, no, I don't regret any of it at all, because it's been such a fulfilling ride, I guess. Like my life before, it was very stable and it was great. And I knew what the path was and how to work my way up. And you can, when you're working a stable career, you can start saving up towards a house and stuff like that. And so everything was kind of just easy, and it was easy to keep going on this path. But now that I'm switching everything up, it's just scary all the time. Like I'm still in school. I don't actually have a job. I don't know what that's going to look like in 2 years when I graduate, how I'll get a job, where I'll be, like, etc. So I sacrificed a lot, but at the same time, like, I feel much more fulfilled. I feel happier. It's exciting. I don't have that nagging thing behind a wall kind of tapping and saying, hey, when are you going to let me out?
Yeah.
Because now that thing is just, it's out in the open. I'm pursuing it, versus like before, somebody would see something in a drum and be like, oh my gosh, you should like sell these. And I'd be like, no, who would buy them?
Right. Just quickly, forgive me if you're hearing like dogs barking or cars starting and stuff. I'm at the Oakland studio, and like the garage doors open to get some air in here. So I don't know I hope it's not distracting you.
I don't hear any of that, but now you should go and add some sound effects.
Yeah, I know. Now we're just going to have like really crazy things added. So, well, I mean, it seems like instinctually you are like a storyteller. It sounds like you have stories in your mind. If you're not only, from the animation I've seen, but the things that I wake up and I see, like you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like doing your 365 watercolor. And what I'd like to know is like, what inspires you? I mean, it's obvious to me, it's probably obvious to you, but if not, it's obvious to me that you're a competitive person.
Oh no, you think so?
Yes, definitely. But I think you're competitive with yourself.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
And you're an ambitious person.
Yeah, I feel like I'm running my own race. Like I'm not comparing myself to anybody, I guess. Like
Right.
I was thinking about this the other day because I'm working on a stop motion production. I can't really share any details about that, but I was thinking like, what is success to me with this production? Because I have to get levels of approval and feedback from external sources, and for me, the thing that I'm striving towards is just feeling proud, I guess, like looking at something myself and not questioning if I need somebody else's approval for me to feel good about it, I guess. But if I feel good about what I've done, then like I'm totally satisfied. So I'm striving to get to a place where I'm really personally happy with the art and animation and stories that I'm pushing out.
Yeah.
And part of going to school is to really pursue a good quality of art and storytelling and know that I am learning as much as I can to make it the best thing possible, I guess. And I still feel far away from what I'm trying to achieve. I don't know. Do you ever feel like there's something inside of you or in your head and it's like an idea or a story, and when you put it on paper, it doesn't really hit the nail on the head, and you share with other people and they don't really get it. Yeah. And then, life goes by and years goes by, and then you revisit that thing and you're like, oh my gosh, that's such crap. No wonder. Mm-hmm. And then you wonder, well, what don't I know to make it better to share that thing yet? So I feel like I'm rambling now, but I feel like I'm on a journey to figure that out.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about story is, first, how do you tell a good story? When you're younger, especially, you think all your ideas are gold because if you're around people, your elders are like, oh, that's so wonderful. Look what you've done, and then that's where the whole idea of let's bring it in front of peers and see what they think. So, but the stories that you have produced, even short form, I really like that. You kind of follow a very basic formula in some of it where you're telling them what you're about to tell them, you tell them, and then you just kind of tell them what you told them in kind of the conclusion. So even with your wizard animation, which seemed to get a lot of traction, the first line is, I could only turn things into ducks, right? Or not one of the first lines, but then we enjoy, I mean, who doesn't love seeing things turn into ducks? That was pretty great. And the way you do it is awesome. You obviously have these like chops for coming up with stories. So like, not to dig too deep into what you're working on now, but does story drive your animation? Does animation drive your story? Is it back and forth?
Well, thanks for the props. I feel like I can't animate unless there is a story. Like I can't enjoy the characters or what I'm doing unless I've somehow created a whole backstory and like who this person is. Because to me, it just is a drawing then. But what I tried to do in school, for instance, like with character design class, like every time we had to design a character, the task would be like design a character that first draw them as a baby, then draw them as a teenager, then an old person, etc. Or like design an animal and do like a 360 full spin with it. But like for me, I would spend like 2 weeks. It's like doing 2 weeks. I would spend like 2 weeks less, like 2 days, trying to figure out the whole story of what this character is. Because once I do that, then everything just comes naturally, type of thing. So like with the wizard, the story was, I wanted to create a sense of, you look at this wizard and you think he's a really dopey old wizard who just is really frustrated and like he's struggling to like be satisfied with his spells and he's just disgruntled. And that's why he's kind of like he's kind of this blob shape, and he only has eyes and a mouth, and like his expressions are very bland. And he's like really wiggly and wobbly because he's like tried so hard in the past to like come up with these elaborate spells, and they always just turn into ducks. So for me, and also when I look at art, I feel like I appreciate art more when I can look at something and you can tell there's a story, like the character's holding something that maybe relates to where they were the day before, what they're eating for lunch, versus just like randomness, I guess. So for me, it's story drives kind of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to hear how it informs what you're doing. I very much I've been working on a project for a while with Mike Owens and Wendy and Greg that you've and I've definitely been working on the minutia of this Bible, that any question you could possibly ask about the characters, the environment, the science, the everything in this world, I could answer it. Yeah. And I always kind of equate it to like really kind of pulling back the slingshot and really taking aim and really getting as pinpoint as possible and shooting it. But at the same time, somebody could come along with a slingshot and just hit it. And it's interesting how everyone has their own process. So when you're creating the wizard, you felt like maybe you couldn't have told that story without doing all that backstory. Like, or do you feel like it wouldn't, I mean, I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but do you feel like you would not have had the same quality of animation, or would it not have been the same fulfillment of process for you?
I think it's all encompassing. Like I want to create something that somebody wants to watch more than once. And I think I could have created that entire segment where a wizard comes on, he says he can only do spells about ducks, he turns something into a duck, and then he does it a few times and then leaves. But I don't think it would have the same impact if the character design didn't give you a more like complete sense, I guess. Because imagine the whole thing, but with a totally different design, it might not have worked as well because, like, for instance, it's hard to describe. Like, specifically, I wanted it to be in stop motion. I don't think you could tell that same story in 2D or CG because, like, when I'm thinking of the character design, I'm also thinking of the elements that I want to use and how they intertwine with each other. Like, before I even came up with the wizard was saying, I wanted the like explosions to be made out of what is that stuff called? Cotton, whatever. And like part of that, I don't know, it's just like one complete thing in my mind. It's hard for me to separate those things. And I find that when I do separate those things, I don't enjoy the process, and I don't think the design works as effectively, I guess. So for me, whenever I'm creating anything, it has to be story driven, but the whole thing has to be like a complete feeding into itself with each other.
So then the shorts that you've created, I'd like to talk more about that in relation to like principles of animation and staging and all that kind of stuff. Like what is one of the most important things that you've learned going to Sheridan? You're paying, money for our new education and new career. What do you feel like you're pulling away from the process that maybe you couldn't have done otherwise by just getting a camcorder and doing it yourself? A camcorder. Listen to me. I sound like a old man.
Oh boy, that's a big question because there's so many aspects to animation that it's hard to just pinpoint one thing. I think the biggest thing and the biggest reason why I decided to go to Sheridan instead of like self-study was to be surrounded by other individuals who are passionate and learning at the same time so that I can feed off of their processes. And also at least for me, when I see somebody learning something, I learn better that way. Like I can see where they started, what they changed and how it got better, and then incorporate that into what I'm doing from what they learned too. Mm-hmm. So like, gosh, I mean, I've learned a ton about staging and cinematography from like storyboarding and like figuring all that stuff out and like how to make your eye follow properly across the screen. I really tried to put that into effect because we're talking about the wizard and like specifically where he points, where the magic goes, where it comes on screen, where it hits, stuff like that. I wanted it to be very, very clear without any confusion, because I've realized how easy it is to create confusion on screen if you don't purposely do those things.
Right.
And I've noticed as soon as somebody says, "Oh, what happened there?" I'm like, "Oh no, I have to go back to the drawing board because it wasn't clear enough." Right. So there's like that. There's like elements of, well, there's story obviously, but elements of design principles and like, just everything, like life drawing. Even though I absolutely hate life drawing, it teaches you to like really get good at draftsmanship and like posing and staging. And like with the wizard, when I was animating, I didn't hit poses right, and I went back and animated again because I knew that, okay, you want it to work and use effective work of your effective space, then you have to hit on these things. So gosh, everything. It's just a slow, like I feel like I don't even know what I'm learning until I go back and go, oh my gosh, my work has increased or looks so much better than before.
Yeah. Someone's pushing by a very large cart. Okay. Sorry about that.
So with Sheridan, it's like the feedback loop that you get from the professors and the students. It's almost invaluable. Like if I was learning at home, I'm not somebody who learns very well, just kind of in an endless self loop, because I find that I just get caught up in my own head. Whereas when I have that external influence, even though I don't see that I'm learning in the immediate moment, it's like a gradual thing.
Mm-hmm. So getting a little bit into the education, Sheridan specifically, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar everywhere. Does Sheridan, was it a strenuous process to get into the school, or is it kind of an open enrollment and you're kind of your own gauge of success? I mean, obviously there's grades and everything, but what was that process like for you to get into that school?
Getting in is extremely stressful.
Okay.
About 2,000 people apply every year, and they only accept about 125 students. Wow. So the acceptance rate is very low. And I knew that going in, especially, so I decided to go in, I think it was July, when I went to that studio and talked to all those people. And then they start, your portfolio is due in February. So what I immediately did was just research as much as I could about. Do you want me to start over when it's done?
No, I think we'll just wait. I think just continue. It's fine. Sorry about that. Someone's pushing out around a cart.
It's okay. Yeah. So I decided to go in July. Like I decided that I was going to go to Sheridan in July, or at least attempt to go to Sheridan in July, and it's due in February. So from that point, I started researching as much as I could. And it's really helpful because a lot of people put their portfolios online and critique them with what the grades they got to get in. So you can see the portfolios that got in. And when I saw the portfolios that got in, I was like, holy crap, like I'm nowhere near this skill level at all. Like I would try to, there's like, you have to draw like hands, like a hand grabbing something and pushing something, whatever, as part of the portfolio. And I would try to draw hands. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to get in because my hands suck so bad. Because all I'd ever drawn was like these stick figure eggs before, nothing like anatomy studies or whatnot. So I immediately started practicing every night. And then I hired a tutor who I met with twice a week, who had helped students get into Sheridan before. And he really, really helped me up my game. And like, you know, when you're paying somebody, it was quite expensive actually, but I was like, you know what, I am going to do this because I'm going to put my best shot in. I had no plan B. It was only plan A. I was like, if I don't get into Sheridan, I guess it's a sign that I'm not meant to do animation with my life. And I like kept it a secret from everybody except like people very, very close to me, which was very stressful as well. Cause like, you know, when you're at work and like working on a portfolio and then going to work and not being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just did everything I possibly could. I talked to people that went to Sheridan. I got in touch with Sheridan professors. I hired a tutor. I was practicing every single night. I went to the Toronto School of Art to do life drawing lessons. I lived across the street from OCAD. I went there to do life drawing lessons. Yeah, it was just, what I would do is I'd do the whole portfolio requirements because from the year previous, and then redo it, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then when they release their portfolio, the upcoming portfolio requirements for the upcoming year, I just kept redoing it and redoing it so that I had a complete portfolio, and then I would complete the portfolio again and take the best piece, and then eventually I ended up with what I was satisfied with, and then applied on the second last day, submitted my portfolio on the second last day because I was still like doing life drawing, and then just sweated. And I honestly didn't think I would get in. And then I remember when I got my acceptance, I thought it was fake. I was like, there's no way. This must be like a mistake. And so I just waited and waited, and it was true. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm going.
Wow. It's interesting how something earlier in your life that presented a struggle, you decided to kind of go away from, but now you seem to be really kind of almost on the attack. Like, I'm going to conquer this. It's like a mountain climber. It's like, when I have students and they do the exercise and they do it the one time, and it shows that you've done it the one time without having ever done it before, I will say, do this again. And there's a frustration. And I think we spoke about this before. The only thing that gets in the way of evolution is our Neanderthal brainstem telling us, hold on to that fear, protect yourself. Don't try to do something you're not able to do, because in our mind, it's like that means danger. So it sounds like you're really kind of coming at it from more of an intellectual perspective, in that, I mean, you're conquering that brainstem fear that you might have had earlier in your life that kind of took you in one direction. Is that like something that you have to make a conscious choice with? Because hiring a tutor and putting in all this extra time while still going to school and not being able to tell many people, that is very much outside of the comfort zone of people, creating stress, So how do you manage switching your life path from all that stress management? What do you do? I mean, or is the
you're hitting a little bit of an emotional nerve for me, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry if it's too much.
No, this is fine. And I like talking about this stuff because it's not something that I think a lot of people talk about. And for me, it's emotional because it's bringing up all these feelings of like, when I was working for those 7 years and going to school for those extra 4 years, and this thing in the back of my mind, just hoping that somebody is going to, a Hollywood director is going to be like, oh my gosh, Terry, I met you at a party and I think you're cool. Do you want to direct the next movie? Like, that's never going to happen. You have to work for what you want to happen in your life. And I really realized that at my last job at the software company, because I reached a point there where I wasn't doing, in my opinion, a very good job. And I was like, well, dang, I need to really step up my game. And I did, and ended up building a big revenue driver for the business out of that, which helped me realize that I can kind of do something if I really put my mind to it. And so, no, I still like, it was very, very tough to still pursue this and to pursue all, like you said, I was going to work and hiring a tutor and stuff. And I'm rambling over my own words because I have so many thoughts in my head. I don't even know where to start. I reached a point where I understood in my career that if I want to pursue something, I have to make it happen. And I also had kind of the insight of how to make that happen and to put all of my energy into one focused thing. And it's really hard to do that even still. And when I do something and it sucks, I still get really frustrated. And to break through that is really tough. But at the same point, I know I have to if I want to improve. And I think the maturity of just having a career and being a little bit older has taught me to push through that no matter what, because younger me would reach that frustration and go, oh, that was so frustrating. I don't like feeling frustrated. I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. And so can you help me bring me back on track a little bit with your question again?
Well, it's interesting. I was talking about stress management, but one of the things that I also have noticed with certain students is that if they are in an environment where they're kind of pursuing their dream, if you will, and then they're put in an environment where it challenges them, I've seen a lot of students kind of retreat, and partially the brainstem thing. But the other thing is, I think as a student, sometimes you're like, I just want to be done with school. I've done all this stuff and I want to like just start doing rather than learning. It doesn't work that way. But the stress of, you kind of like giving yourself no safety net in a way after you had been in a very safe environment is kind of what I was speaking to before. Like, you are competitive with yourself now, because if you want to pursue what I'm going to call your dream, you have to, it's kind of like, I'm going to be doing this or I'm not going to be who I want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, putting yourself out there without the safety net, and that's what I was also wondering about is your support system. You were saying that you couldn't even reach out to a lot of people and kind of share, and, work colleagues, you don't know what kind of feedback they might be giving you if you're trying to switch gears, if your boss finds out all these, there's a lot of real things in a traditional career that you would be scrutinized for. And you seem to realize that, but, harboring all that stress and then continuing to produce for something that may or may not happen according to you, I find that really great. I feel like that kind of ambition it either comes from life experience or just comes from within somehow, comes from an external support. And it seems like without the support system, you were saying it was a really kind of emotional thing to kind of go through that whole process. Like, did you think about, obviously you did because you didn't think you were going to get in. What was your thought if you weren't going to get in? Like, what did you think? Like, I'm going to make up a plan B, or did you feel like, well, I'll just get back into the business and be done with it?
I don't know. I honestly had, if you asked me what would happen, the answer would just be blank, because there was no option to not get in, but I was also terrified that I wouldn't get in. And I didn't think I would get in. And that's why I did so much to try to get in. Yeah. Because for me, like, I reached a point where, I said before, where I broke down and saw that little voice inside of me that was like, this is who you are, Terry. This is like, you are a storyteller. You are an animator. You should do something creative with your life, or you won't live who you were meant to be as a person with. And like, I think, maybe I'm not meant to be an animator as a person, but like all of my experiences growing up and things that I like, they all kind of like converge into what I'm pursuing now. And if I wasn't pursuing that, I wouldn't be happy with my life. And to realize what would make me happy with my life and then to not pursue that, I don't know what that means. So if I didn't get into Sheridan, I probably would have figured out a different way to pursue this. But there was no, like, I had an end date that I was going to quit my career no matter what, even if I didn't get into Sheridan. But then, like, what happens then? I don't know. It was just blank. There was nothing.
Sure. But that you're setting yourself up again, even without a safety net for that. It's like, I'm going to quit this career. And it sounds like when you put your mind to it, you're going to do it.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess, but it just leads back to, like, I remember I used to think of what at the time with my career, I was seeing things, I was meeting check marks that I thought would make me successful. For instance, like, you're doing well in your career and you have opportunities come up and things like that. And I kind of just projected my life if I had continued on that path. And the story of that was, Terry lives a comfortable life. He has a house, he has a cottage, he goes on vacation to luxurious places. I don't know, not so luxurious, but he goes on vacation. And it's like, are those the things that I really want to have in my life? And then my gravestone to say, like, Terry was a pretty good marketer and, lived a comfy life. And I just couldn't relate to that. And when I couldn't relate to my own life path, then I was like, well, what can I relate to? And I would start to think about, like, my gravestone would say, Terry, pursued his dreams and hopefully changed the world in a positive way. And I was like, that to me sounds so much better. And to know that if I make the right choices, I can end up there, because, I'd made conscious choices to pursue a business career and was seeing successes with that. So why not make conscious choices to pursue something that's more directly related to what I want to do? And hopefully, fingers crossed, I can end up at somewhere the same place, and if not even better. So, yeah.
Do you have stories like that are just that you want to tell?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, so I have stories, and I've worked on people with stories that, as a storyteller, I need to tell. I need to tell the stories. And once it's out there, it's kind of like more of you can be seen in a holistic sense. If they know your story, they know you better. They know your life view on something, because obviously you're putting whether it's your humor or your life experience or your perspective on the world in your stories.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's pretty great. It's also hard. And so when you do put yourself out there and you do put your work out there, how has it been received?
Well, I mean, it's tough, and it relates back to what I said before about just trying to feel proud about my own work, because I remember when the Silly Duck Wizard came out, the entire time I was working on it, I didn't think anybody would like it, but I was completely personally satisfied with the humor and the look and feel of it. And like, I came up with it just kind of sitting on my couch. I came up with it in like a minute and a half, just with a piece of paper. And when I looked at it, I was like, I just need to make this. And I think it's funny and cute, and I just have to do it. And the whole time I was working on it, there were two reasons also why I was working on it. One was I wanted to create something that looked professional so that other stop motion animators could see that I was serious about what I was doing, because I'd never created something professional looking in stop motion. And the other thing was I wanted to I was hoping to make my brother laugh because the voice actor who does it is one of my brother and I's favorite independent animators. And he said, yes, he would do voice acting for me. So I was like, yes. And so I was like, my brother's name is Tyson. And the whole time I was like, Tyson is going to be so surprised that I got this animator to do this voice.
Yeah.
Acting. Yeah. His name is Davey Swat Paz, or Davey Ferguson is his official name, but he's an independent animator from the UK, and his stuff is just amazing. And so I was like, I hope my brother laughs at this, and I hope that professional stop motion people think it looks good. And other than that, it was just for myself. And I remember one of the first people I showed, I won't say who it was, but they saw it and were just like, oh, okay, why is there no background? And it just like, it didn't hit for them at all. And I was so worried. And I remember not even wanting to publish it online or anything, because I was like, people are just going to think this is dumb. And then, I did, and the rest is history. It has multiple articles written about it. It ended up getting me connections to work on more stop motion productions professionally. The YouTube video has over 200,000 views now, so it's become kind of my signature thing. And I remember on Reddit, there's like 2,000 comments of just people. There wasn't a single bad comment, which was weird, of just everybody saying they loved it. And it was I remember just lying in my bed, just scrolling through and just feeling so weird that it connected with so many people, and I didn't even intend or think it would. So that kind of just gave me confidence to just pursue myself, I guess, and not have to worry about what other people thought. Because, I mean, this is kind of a long story, but part of what I've been pursuing with animation is the opposite of what I was doing with my marketing career, because I spent the last 7 years doing market research, buying demographical data, doing focus group surveys, going into YouTube SEO, Google SEO to figure out what people want to see, and then create stuff like advertisements and blog posts and stuff like that, specifically geared towards what people want. And so it was a career 100% driven by trying to create success by understanding what people want. Yeah. And I wanted to get away with that, at least for the first little while with my animation, because I wanted to just do what I wanted to do. And I think at some point I'm going to get back to doing that research again, because, that pays off. Yeah. But the Silly Duck Wizard was 100% just me just wanting to do what I want to do. And then it connected with other people, which made me really happy.
So I know I want to protect the anonymity of the person who didn't like the white background or maybe didn't understand the white background, but I do want to go back to that because I think it's a common experience in artists who do think of things, or whether they try to tell a story they're thinking of, or they work on something and they show it to somebody, and they do get what could be considered either non-flattering critique or critical critique, like in a negative sense. How first do you choose, like, why did you choose this person to show this to? And second, how did you move on from that moment? And then the third question is, how does that inform how you go forward with this process?
I chose that person because that person was around when I finished it and also had seen some of the process. So that person was also already aware of what I was doing and interested to see the final process, I guess.
Okay. A creative?
Yeah, okay. A creative. And I love this person. This person is great. This person has given me a lot of very helpful feedback in my animation career, and nothing against them at all. It's just, it's art, so it's not their thing, and that's fine. And I felt very it's hard when I spent months working on this every single day, and then when you don't get the reaction that you hope for, it's kind of disheartening. And so one thing that I do obsessively is I watch and rewatch everything that I create probably over 100 times, because like any animation that I make or any image that I make, I obsessively watch every little detail, every little corner of the screen, because I want it to be something that I can't, it's weird. Like, I want to learn from my own mistakes and also create something that I can't personally see things that I would change based on the art style I'm trying to achieve, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I just went and obsessively watched The Silly Duck Wizard afterwards. And you also said, like, what is the result that I kind of go forward? And it leads back to just trying to feel proud about the work that I do, because I've also learned from social media, it's like a game that you can only lose if you're looking for validation from other people with something specifically that you're trying to create from personal artwork. Like, the social media stuff and whatever from my previous career is extremely helpful, and you just treat what you create as a process that you're constantly improving on to get better at. But if people like it, then you're like, great, and what can I do better next time? But with my art, it's like, if I feel proud of it, then I just have to kind of turn off that thing that looks for validation, and that's so hard to do. Right. But I think it's just something that I'm going to hopefully learn over time.
Yeah. Do you have like a support group now that you have maybe refined a little bit more, that understand the sensibilities of what you're trying to pursue, and you use
my partner Ben, I go to him for like feedback for absolutely everything. He's amazing for it, and he lets me know when there's like something off. And
is he a creative person as well, or?
Yeah, but in different ways. Like, he's not into animation; he's into things like woodworking and stuff like that. So he has a different creative mindset than I do, but he can also, he's familiar with my style and gives me a lot of great feedback all the time. And every time I create any scene or anything, I immediately run to him and ask for his advice.
That's cool. That's a great partnership then.
Yeah, and like my brother is really good for that too. I immediately show him anything that I'm working on, because he's a creative person as well, and his style is kind of similar to mine, but from a CG perspective. But he also has years of experience, of professional experience of storytelling and animation and the principles and everything, so he can immediately identify when something's off too. So. Mm-hmm.
So despite what you had heard about the feedback, or maybe the first reaction wasn't your favorite reaction of why the white background after you put in all this work, you decide to post it anyway. Yeah. Because you believed in it, it seems like.
I mean, I was still very scared. I posted it just because I just wanted to post it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you put in the work. What's the harm, right?
Right. And also I wanted to see people I wanted people to see that I did my best job at trying to create something that looked professional looking as well.
And by this time, you've already built an audience from your podcast, correct? Because you posted, that was completed, was it last year or this year?
Last September. September 2019.
Because I got introduced to it through, again, Mike. He passed it along, and with the Most Stop Mo Fest, which is still on hiatus, we're slating maybe in October. We'll see what happens. He shared it with me, and I loved it, but we had a 3-minute minimum for the entry fee, and I think it might be coming in at 145 or 130 or something.
Yeah, it's 129, I think, exactly.
Okay.
130.
And I was like, this is perfect, and it inspires me to do a shorts type of festival.
No way, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of thing would be perfect for a shorts. The reason I kind of made it on the longer end for any submissions is because it becomes dangerously close to getting a lot of animation exercises.
Right.
And that becomes a whole other ball of wax to sift through. So when I saw it, I was like, this is great. I wish we could use this, but maybe if we have another purpose for it. But in the meantime, you're posting it, and you got a lot of feedback. You have your audience that's already built in that could be critical. Like you said, you put something online, and that's not where you go for validation or feeling good about yourself. But all the sources in which I've seen it being posted or written about, which is a lot of positive stuff about it.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Tell me about like getting it out there and how that made you feel and what that's doing for you.
I mean, I kind of said before, it's kind of my calling card at this point, but I also, I have that marketing background and know that you have to promote, like 80% of your effort should be spent marketing and 20% of your effort should be spent making something. So I actively pushed it out there. So on Reddit, for instance, where it actually hit the front page on the first day, which was incredible, I specifically went through the Reddit subreddit called It's Videos, and I went through to find other posts that were successful, that was somebody doing something in their own time. And I found that there's like this format of a title that's like, I spent all this effort doing something and it kind of looks cool. So, I use that as like I think I said I took 3,000 pictures just to make this dumb wizard turn something into rock. So I like downplayed what I did and put in and try to over exaggerate the work I put in. And that paid off, right? So like there was some research involved in that. I actively reached out to every animation and stop motion magazine online publication. And a number of them ended up writing articles on it, which further increased the spread of that. I put it into a number of festivals, actually won a few categories in a couple of festivals, which was great, which, some people contacted me from that. And then I put on my Instagram and I tagged as many, there's like Instagrams that amalgamate posts and they have like 100,000 followers and all they do is repost other people's stuff. So I got in touch as many of those as I could possibly and said, do you want to put this on your Instagram and just tag me? So I actively work to get the word out there.
The marketing background really comes in handy, huh?
Yeah. So I just did everything that I could think of for free to put the word out there. And if something works, then the ball just rolls on its own. If not, like I do all these things for everything that I publish. The podcast, every single episode, I try to put out there as much as possible. For every piece of animation I put out there as much as possible. The wizard is just the one that hit the most marks to get the most attention, I guess.
And you were saying that was like the first real kind of clean professional piece that you put out to represent your work ethic, your style, your humor. Yeah.
There's other, like I've done 2D animation pieces, but that I think are professional, but they're more or less exercises for school. So they're not like original stories like the Silly Duck Wizard is. So I think they have seen success in their own light, but not from like a connects with the average person success type of deal.
Right.
So yeah, every piece that I create, I try to come up with like a target audience, I guess, that I want to hit on. Like I kind of do my school exercises like that. For instance, like if we have to do a 2D lip sync assignment, I'll think, okay, if I'm going to do this anyways, who what is success for me in this aspect? Is it a personal exercise where I'm learning? Is it to try to get on the front page of Cartoon Brew with like something unique? Is it to, choose the audio of like a famous YouTuber and try to get them to repost? Like I try to come up with another reason and then do my best to get that to pay off. And I'd say like 10% of the time it pays off, but it's that 10% of the time that gets you that little bit more of, attention that spirals and builds.
Well, I directed comedy for a long time in Chicago, and one of the things that I often found is the creative community, the art community supports itself. Yeah. So if you're able to find somebody who is a part of your cast or is doing music or something like that, that you'll have that audience at least.
Yeah.
But do you feel like I'm just asking this probably as a devil's advocate question to see how you answer it, is that do you feel like you're bastardizing your creations by marketing it that way?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What, do you think so?
No, I know a lot of people who will become animators for the art of it, and they don't want it to be a marketing thing to sell a product or to appropriate. And it's just, it's a business. Everyone could do animation in the corner of a book and do a flip book and there's your art, but it's not necessarily going to be seen by anyone except the one who checks out the book at the library the next time.
Yeah.
So, I'm just asking again, as a devil's advocate, I'm not saying you're bastardizing any of your stuff.
Fair. I do have a hard time with that. And that's part of what I'm enjoying about going to school and not having to rely right now on an income that's based on animation, because I want to produce stuff that I don't have to produce to make money, I guess, for the time being. But I also understand that that's how the world works. And if I want to be alive and eat food and have shelter, then I need to do that at some point, I guess.
Sure, yeah. Well, the other thing is you're also using artists that you admire. You're talking about the voice for the wizard. You're kind of not only like paying homage, but possibly even trying to say, I would love for you to somehow be within the universe of creation that I'm in. And maybe, it's kind of like you fulfilling that dream of taking that next step and, really kind of getting into the race with people who can keep the same pace as you or you them.
Well, what I want to what I'm hoping to do is to change the world with what I can offer, I guess, because it's incredibly tough to still pursue this path where you go to animation school, get an internship, work at a big studio like Pixar. Like that's a dream, and it's insanely hard to do at the same time. But if I'm going to pursue that, I feel like why not try my best to pursue the style that I want to and try to input that into the world and see how I can change something small by just having my voice in it, I guess.
Right.
So the reason I do the podcast to learn about the industry but also I understand that, I'm 73 episodes in, maybe one of these connections I've made will lead to an opportunity where I'm able to have my own creative voice in. And then when that thing is created, it changes something about how things would have been otherwise that maybe me not being it might have been different, I guess. And that just kind of feeds why I'm doing this and excites me that I can have my own voice in things that I work on. And so, that's where all the marketing comes in too, because even though I'm putting myself out there like crazy, I'm not, a connection here may pay off in a different way and a word of mouth thing comes back to me. And then I'm able to control my career just a little bit more than if I, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound weird, but like one path for me is to, for instance, become a background painter and paint backgrounds for TV show. And I think that is amazing. And that would fulfill what I'm on this path to do. But I think for me, it would be a little bit more amazing if I could, do a project like that, but it's my story and my style, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying.
Well, I think you're kind of, it sounds a little bit like a negotiation with yourself. It's like, this is my dream, but I would be happy doing this, and trying to shoot for the dream.
Yeah.
I mean, I've, reinvented the idea of telling stories for stage, screen, and what I was saying, but beyond before with you, before we started the interview, trying to see the future of what that's going to look like is tricky. So you kind of contextualize it realistically just to kind of keep you on the path, probably.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm also attempting to control my career as much as I can in an industry that I know is very uncontrollable. And you kind of have to go with the flow if you want to get work. So I'm putting out all these seeds in as many ways as I can, so that hopefully 5% of the time I can control what I want to, and be fulfilled in that way too.
So with the podcast, when did that seed get planted? When did you decide I'm going to do episode 1? And
oh man,
like, especially, that's a pretty daunting thing. So I'm interested in how you started it and how you're finding it as you pursue it. I mean, 70 plus episodes is a big accomplishment.
Well, for me, as soon as I start a process, it's harder for me to stop doing that process than to not do it at all. So it's just part of every single week. I have chats lined up every Tuesday. I publish an episode, and it just goes on. It almost, and at this point, it just makes itself, because half the time I don't even have to reach out to people, because I have people wanting to be on it, which is really great. But how I started it wasn't that much of a jump for me, because in my last career, I was actually hopping on weekly calls with people in similar positions to me, just so that I could, at different companies, just so I could learn from how they do things, so I could bring it back to our company and test out different things and try to see if they would pay off, and build the company bigger. So, I'd hop on a call with the SEO guy from like Expedia, and, we'd shoot our shit, and how do you do this, and how do you do that, where have you seen success, blah, blah, blah. So I was already hopping on weekly calls with people. And then when I switched careers, I went to the Taffy Animation Festival, the Toronto Animation Arts Festival International. And it was in October, and I was a new guy on the scene. I didn't know anybody. I was literally just there by myself. And I was just texting my old boss, being like, wouldn't it be, he had told me I should do a podcast before. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these amazing people here at this conference. It's like so inspiring to be surrounded by like these animation masters. And he was like, dude, just walk up to them and ask if they want to be on a podcast. And so I did. The first person I walked up to was Fred Seibert, who he's Frederator Studios. He's the guy who sold Adventure Time and Fairly Odd Parents and all those wonderful shows that everybody knows. So I was just, he had a long lineup of people just fanning over his stuff. And I just walked up to him. I said, hey, my name's Terry. I'm starting a podcast. Do you want to be on it? And he said, sure. He gave me his business card, hooked me up with his receptionist. Yeah. And that's how it started. So I learned so much. His episode was on how to pitch a show, because he's heard a million pitches, and he gave me all the tips of do's and don'ts and what's impressed him and how Adventure Time came to be. And it was so inspiring, and I learned so much that I was just like, all right, I'm just going to keep doing this. And at first it was really tough, because nobody knew who I was. And I probably reached out to like 100 people in the first week, like everybody I followed on Instagram, everybody that I could think of on LinkedIn. I was emailing people's websites. And I don't know, maybe 4 people got back to me, but it just took those 4 people, and then I could start name dropping. So I was like, oh, do you want to be on this podcast? Fred Seibert from Frederator Studios, and Colin Jack from DreamWorks, and et cetera, have been on this. I think is that Sony? I could be mixing that up. Have been on this podcast, and then people will be like, oh, okay, so now it just, the podcast runs itself.
That's great. And it sounds like you said, since you don't think about stopping something once you start it.
Yeah.
What do you have a plan for the podcast? Are you just going to keep going with it? especially going into your third year when you're going to be doing like other things. It's like, I know we were talking about how Google reminders in your calendar have kind of become your savior. So you can time plan and everything. Time management is a huge thing for an animator.
Oh yeah. I mean, once school starts, it's going to be, well, I'm kind of, school is going to be online in the fall because of COVID. And it's a little bit of a blessing for me because I won't have an hour commute one way. So I'll actually have more time to work on these things on the side. Okay. If I don't go super hard with school. But I don't know. I think because I'm 73 episodes in, gosh, I guess I never even thought about it, but I've been doing it over 52 weeks. That's over a year.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I think about this once in a while, if I stop getting something personally out of the podcast, I will probably stop the podcast because I don't want it to turn into this thing that is just a thing for the sake of being a thing.
Like an obligation.
But for me, I still find it really exciting to chat with people every week and learn from them and learn their corner of the world. And here, I still feel really inspired. It's like fuel for me every time I hear somebody's story of how they got into the animation world, because from what I know and what I've learned in hearing all these stories, it takes a lot of confidence and struggle to get into animation versus other career paths, which are more defined and laid out, and maybe easier just to pursue and more comfortable. And so for me, it's always exciting to learn what drove a person to do what they do, and then what kept them going throughout the process. And everybody has a different story and everybody has a different reason. And when I'm kind of like feeling, because my journey is just as tough as anybody else's, I guess, but sometimes I feel like I can't do it and like it's too much and it's overwhelming. The podcast still it's almost like a forced thing that gets me into an optimistic mood because I hear about somebody else's struggles and then my struggles don't feel so alone, I guess. But yeah, and the podcast pays off in different ways. I mean, I meet somebody who knows somebody at Netflix, and then I can pitch the Silly Duck Wizard at Netflix, and that's exciting too. So it has all these weird payoffs that I wouldn't expect otherwise.
Yeah, it seems like it's a great opportunity to kind of corral an animation community, and you're doing it across disciplines.
Yeah.
How are you finding that a lot of the animation community is this massive thing, or are you finding that it's a smaller, how are you finding the network now that you've infiltrated pretty much?
Yeah. The podcast, like almost half of episodes are stop motion at this point.
I know that's why I'm just I love your podcast. It's so great. I feel like, oh man, he's nailing this.
So it's interesting. So it's almost like everybody knows each other, especially in stop motion, because I just talked with Kat, who, oh gosh, I'm going to mess up her last name, so I'm not even going to mess up. But she's just produced the documentary for Spike and Mike, which is coming out on July 14th, and I did an episode with Anthony Scott, and she's like, oh, I worked with him. And Anthony Scott was like, oh, I worked with this other person that you had on the podcast. And that, like, everybody in stop motion is just like knows everybody else that I've had on the podcast. So it seems like a small world. And same with like the other, like all the storyboarders seem to know each other, and like all the character designers kind of know each other, and like the scene in Toronto, everybody knows each other. So it's like there's all these small world niches, but then it's endless. Like, so I've had some animators from the UK, and they're in a whole different niche, small world community over there, and they don't necessarily know the people in Canada. So I like the podcast because everybody knows each other, but there's always more people to discover, I guess. And now that it's grown in following a little bit too, I get some people commenting on that too. They like knowing what's going on in other areas of the world. So I'm trying to actively bring on other countries, but it's kind of tough because it's hard to get introductions to those places because they're very separate. And my way of doing it right now is just through Instagram and LinkedIn. And it's kind of tough to get people to respond back to you. I feel like I'm at the start again where I'm reaching out to 100 people and maybe 4 respond. And of those 4, maybe 2 end up actually doing the podcast. Mm-hmm. So it's just a slow build, but it'll grow. Just like now I find it very easy to get connections in North America because I know so many people from the podcast.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's cool. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because I've been looking overseas for a while. Actually, I probably have some people that I could set you up with for interviews in the stop motion community. But it's interesting because stop motion seems to be kind of a little bit of a contained discipline that people will do on their own and develop some wonderful stuff, but not necessarily put themselves out there. And if you see like a studio that's in Morocco, all of a sudden you look into it and it's like, oh, maybe there's 2 people at that studio. So like sometimes I think it's that self-deprecating, oh, I'm not really a studio, I'm putting myself out as a studio. So it's a very tricky thing to kind of get people to open up on that level.
Well, and I think stop motion has even higher barriers than other forms of animation because you need so much funding to put on a professional looking production. Mm-hmm. Like I was only able to create the Silly Duck Wizard because Sheridan has a full professional studio with like camera rigs, cameras, lenses, the software, like lighting equipment, like everything. So that was like such a blessing for me to use. But for instance, like there are a ton of stop motion animators in like India, for instance, that I follow on Instagram who are just kind of doing things at home. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while they'll ask me like, how do you work on a production and stuff? And I don't actually know yet, unless I think that's changing because, materials are getting cheaper and people are working more from home. But it's like, I find it almost disheartening how much barrier there is to stop motion specifically. And that's what I felt when I was coming out of high school and looking for work. And that's why I mentally blocked it off for so long. But
yeah,
I think it's changing now. And, people like Kevin Perry are proving that you can do desktops or like Frantic Frames on Instagram are proving that you can do desktop stop motion, and actually brands will want to work with you because they want that authentic, down to earth, made it at home look and feel. So
especially if you're doing something new and innovative, people are always looking for a new visual appeal. So I had a question that I was going to just ask you about that.
I don't even know if I answered your question you asked.
I was just thinking of I know what I was going to follow up with. So you're going back right now. We are still in the COVID pandemic. And you had said that your classes are going to be online in the fall. How do you, what's your thought on doing stop motion online other than gaining the hour or 2 for a commute? Are you doing stop motion? Like you said, like you're going to do this kind of co-op. Is the co-op for this year that's coming up in the fall?
The co-op will be next summer.
Okay. So then basically you're in your 3rd year and you're continuing with studying stop motion or just animation in general?
So how Sheridan is set up is you take all of the major courses like 2D animation, storyboarding, etc. But then in 3rd year, you get to do a group film, and you can choose what medium you do the group film in. So there's one stop motion group film that's made, so you have to apply and put together a little portfolio because there's only so many spots for that. And then you can do CG as well, and you have to apply and put together a portfolio if you want to do that. Mm-hmm. Or kind of the rest. By default, you do 2D animation. So you can kind of choose if you want to do stop motion, CG, or 2D for your group film, which spans the whole year. So you do all your major courses, and then some of your courses you're making this group film.
Okay. So have you already gone through that process for the stop motion film, or are you just not?
The portfolio is due at the end of July, so I haven't finished it. I mean, I have most of the components. But
I'm assuming it was stop motion. Am I right or am I wrong?
You assuming I want to do stop motion?
Yes. Yeah.
I do. It's a little bit weird this year because we're all working from home though. So I don't even know if it's going to happen, I guess. It depends on how many people actually end up doing or choosing to go into stop motion. And it'll be very different because it depends on everybody's camera and what equipment from home.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think it'll be a really cool challenge where you come up with a story that you can't use the school's studio for, and you have to create from like 10 different people's apartments wherever you live or roommates or whatever with the equipment they have. So it'll be very interesting. I've been trying to think of ways that a story can work aesthetically and storytelling from that perspective, and I'm still trying to figure that out. So definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing how that goes, because one of the obstacles that I was running into as a educator, and also with most stop mo, I want to develop that into more of an educational process. Is I really feel like the stop motion process, especially in the learning process, is a hands-on process. And it's an interactive process. It's not necessarily, you could give feedback on things without weight or things that don't need structure virtually. But if you're talking about rigging and you're talking about armatures and you're, that kind of thing, your sets and props, you need to kind of see that they're going to be durable, at least for the production. So thinking of that creatively, whether it's a different form of animation, pixelation, cutout, trying to level the playing field, if you will, across your team, seems like it's kind of tricky.
Yeah, for sure. Or it might just be a clash of styles in a way that works.
Yeah, that's the kind of exciting part if you could draw from that at all. So
yeah, and I don't know if anything's really been done like this before. I know that there are stop motion productions going on right now where people have like a little studio in their house, but from like a student collaboration standpoint, it might be a first.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. I'd be interested to hearing what that's going to be. And I know you said you have another stop motion project that's kind of in the works that you can't speak of.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's something separate from this. I'm assuming
it's separate. Yeah, it's separate from that. Yeah.
And this is your own thing, or is this something you're working on with the group?
It's
talk about it at all.
It's not my own. It's being commissioned of me, I guess I can say.
Okay. Cool. So you are able to find some work as a stop motion animator.
Yeah.
There you go. So just to I want to circle back a little bit. You were talking about how in 2007, I think you said like stop motion wasn't really a thing, or if in Toronto, you were kind of getting some discouraging words. Like the other day, I live with a little 3-year-old, and she was just disappointed because she found out that there is no such thing as a mermaid.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Well, there are people who are professional mermaids.
Well, not anatomically per se.
Not anatomically.
So she was just kind of like, "Oh, there's just no mermaids." It's like I didn't want to tell her about unicorns, but I'm just wondering, Lance, when somebody comes along and you had this drive, and somebody is giving you some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it reality or if it's just a perspective, because I worked at a university where somebody would say, don't get into stop motion because you'll never get a career.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you were faced with in 2007. And here we are now. You're going to school, you're going full throttle, you're getting commissioned work, you're putting yourself out there. How would you advise people to kind of handle those situations? It affected you to a degree.
Oh, well, it changed the next 4 years, changed the next 11 years of my life when I was hit with the reality that stop motion isn't going to be a career I can jump into right now and make a living. And it was devastating. It was like, well, I was so excited about this cool art form that I discovered that I could really express myself through. And now it's just not a thing. So I have to accept reality. And
did you feel like that was reality, or did you feel like that was that person's reality?
Well, there was nothing that I could find in Canada that I could make a career out of with stop motion. And I'd already been so besides those short films that I'd done in high school, I had also done in my own time over 50 shorts that were 30 seconds or less in claymation. So I had a website. I was putting them on YouTube. I was like actively involved in stopmotionanimation.com, which was like the biggest community of stop motion animators at the time. I was chatting with any stop motion animator I could find, or on YouTube, or like websites or whatnot. Like I was every single day, if I wasn't, working at Tim Hortons during the day or going school, I was living and breathing stop motion and researching as much as I could.
Just like the real freeze, I want to let people know Tim Hortons is a restaurant, right?
It's a coffee. It's like a coffee shop that's like on every single corner.
In Canada, at least.
In Canada, yeah, it's in the States and too. So there you go.
I've seen a few. Okay, just wanted to. Okay, go ahead.
It's like a cheaper Starbucks, like Starbucks divided by 5.
Okay.
So yeah, I was working there selling, making coffee, and I didn't even drink coffee. So I was like so actively involved in stop motion, and like I never got once an opportunity. The only opportunity that came my way was a voice actor from the UK being like, "Hey, I have this song. Do you want to animate to it for my portfolio?" And her name was Martine Dunn. And I did. I made a little animation to her singing this like quirky little song, and I sent it to her, and she like put it on her website. That was the only, and it was just like a collab. I didn't get paid or anything. That was the only opportunity I ever got from making like full short films. That were, like the last one was 10 minutes, and like 50 stop motion films, putting myself out there as much as I could. And it was, I guess, also at the time I was comparing myself to my brother, who was doing this with CG animation and getting like job offers from around the world, like, winning contests online, and like he's on like Wikipedia for like, because he was such a like forefront animator when CG was becoming a thing, and like now he has a full career. So I guess I was comparing myself to that at the same time, and it
was the gauge of success. Yeah.
There was just nothing. There was nothing in Canada. I couldn't find a single job. I applied to like Aardman internship, Leica internship. I applied to every single stop motion company. I reached out to every single company that I could find that did stop motion and said like, "Hey, I'm a young animator. Here's my reel," and just nothing. So like I didn't know what to do other than what I was doing and just getting nothing. So I was like, this just doesn't exist. And it still now it doesn't exist. It exists for a few people. Like there are for sure people doing stop motion in Canada and in Toronto. Like you have Kevin Perry, you have Stop Motion Department, which is run by Philip and Eddles and Evan Dereshi, and they're amazing animators, and they've hired a few people and they're expanding. You have Dale Hayward and Sylvie Trouvé in Montreal, and like Eric Goulet in Montreal, and you have like little. You have like small groups of
mom and pop type of studios.
Yeah, mom and pop type of studios. But there's no, at least in Canada, it's not like Portland in the States, or it's not like Leica where there's a giant studio that's going to hire 50 animators. That doesn't exist in Canada. Right. So what I'm pursuing doesn't exist. And so that's also why I understand I have to go so hard to make it exist. I have to get those connections. I have to make professional looking stuff that people are going to want to hire me for. I have to grind the grind, because part of the dream that I'm like scared to pursue, and is like it's my A plan that I haven't really admitted yet, because my overall plan is to pursue animation and get into the animation industry. And I would love to get into 2D animation because I absolutely love doing that as well. But the thing that I'm like pursuing without really admitting is that I want to build stop motion up more as a medium in Canada, because that's the opportunity that I didn't have when I would have loved to have that. And I know other people that have graduated Sheridan and studied stop motion, and they're not working in stop motion because there's nothing there. And I've talked to them and they would love to, but there's just no opportunity.
Right.
And I think part of, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, you're preaching to the choir here. Same experiences.
And if I look, when I think back to when when I went through school the first time, I had the mentality of, I just have to get through school and then I'll get a job and then I'll start my life. And then that's almost a trap because it kept me from putting off really pursuing my career hard in business when I could have hit the ground running from day one in school versus waiting until I graduate and then getting an entry-level job and blah, blah, blah. And part of what I learned at the software company is I would much rather hire, I don't know, somebody who has no schooling but knows what they're doing and can show me results of what they're doing, like they've built an online business themselves, versus somebody who, has a degree on paper that says that they have a business degree. And so like now I know that a lot of students are doing that because that's what I did. They're going to school and waiting for their career to start once they finish school and once they get that entry-level job. And then you have to wait 10 years before you're at a point where you're comfortable with the money you're making and where you're at in your career and in a level. And then you start to think about, what can I actually do with my life? At least that's what I did. Versus now my mentality with school is like, okay, school, I'm learning. How can I build connections on the side? How can I start thinking about how to build a studio, and how can I find people who I want to work with? And like, I'm approaching it from a much different level. And so those people who want to be working in stop motion, but can't be because they need to pay the bills and whatnot, I feel like, and so they're working in 2D or storyboard or whatever, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a unique position where I can start thinking about how to build up those things while I'm in school now versus, when I'm already 10 years down the road in animation and start thinking, how can I build these things?
Right. Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is kind of the mission of Mo Stop Mo, just really kind of bringing the community together, finding opportunities. The eye of the audience now is so sophisticated that with CG, when it was a very big booming, still big and booming, but the eye of the audience is getting a little bit acclimated to the look and the feel, so they just want to kind of figure out what is the new look. And if you see something, again, I use this as an example, even though it's not stop motion, is Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And it just shows like having fun, showing that it's not just one way, and that it's successful in its look and its story. Really kind of helps us with trying to figure out where to go. And it honestly, like, tap into that audience. I think stop motion really has the ability to kind of tap into that audience and kind of find opportunity, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I love what you're doing.
Hang on for 1 second. Wait, hold on for a second.
Can I please draw on the fence? Is that all right?
What's that?
Can I draw on the fence?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. We just had somebody come in. Someone in the studio is going to turn on the fan because it's getting a little warm.
I don't blame them.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Well, I love what you're doing with Mo Stop Mo and building that community, because like people who work in stop motion, at least traditional, I think it's changing now, but you're very alone. Like, it's like one person in a small town here who discovers it and likes it, and then one person in a small town 500 kilometers away, and they never meet each other. And part of what I think stop motion animators offer is a really unique perspective on storytelling. And by building a community and getting more of those people connected, I think it can really change how stories are told, because stop motion is a medium that forces you to think past just the animation on the screen and what's really going on in a unique way. So yeah, I definitely think that is part of like you building Mo Stop Mo is like part of changing how people consume animation, just like Spider-Verse tried to risk and, had fun with it. I think getting more voices together in a room can have a bigger impact.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that I was able to discover you, and I feel like we're going to cross paths, hopefully.
Yeah, we keep crossing paths.
yeah. It's kind of cool. And even like what this project I'm working on with Mike and Greg and Wendy is that it doesn't necessarily have to be in one location to work on the film. As long as we're working on the same story, we're working on seeing if we can make something that is, outside of different time zones and borders and whatever.
Yeah.
Because I like, even though it's a small community, it's not a cohesive community per se, but I appreciate what you've been doing to build it up, and I'm looking forward to what you're doing in the future.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you just a series of kind of quicker answer questions, if you would.
All right, grill me.
So if you had one stop motion secret to reveal, what would it be? Something that you've done in the past that really works. I'm not asking you to give up anything that you don't want to give up, but when I graduated, I found a lot of people held a lot of secrets to their chest. Whether it's the gauge of,
Sure.
floral wire that they use, what kind of, how to machine, all this kind of stuff. Do you have any animation
Well, one secret is that I've injured myself twice by doing extraneous activity because I will just forget about health when I'm animating. So please take care of your body, take rests because you don't want to hurt yourself. And now I have like chronic shoulder pain.
Oh no. Oh boy.
That's not good.
Yeah. You got to get in there.
I like to say. Yeah. But oh gosh, I don't really have any secrets. I buy all my shit at the dollar store. Really, I don't really.
But that's a secret in itself. There's a lot of people who would think, "Oh my gosh, you got to buy expensive rigs and armatures and stuff." I
bought my first expensive rig just recently because I was tired of using dollar store wire and just having it so flimsy. And that's part of me taking better care of my body because it would take so long to get a dollar store wire to go where I want it to versus a professional ball and socket rig.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of people ask me about the mouths, but they're just replacement mouths. So I just make like 20 mouths and just replace them. So it's super easy. I don't mold them. Can't think of.
Are they just like Sculpey, or are you using oil-based clay?
I use dollar store plasticine, and it gets messy and melts, but I don't care.
Well, it doesn't show. I was like looking at something that's really clean, so it's just a matter of keeping it cool enough for that pose, I guess.
Yeah.
LED lights probably help a lot more than tungsten lights.
Sure. I can't think of any other stop motion secrets that I harbor.
Okay.
I don't know. The wizard was made out of a chicken nugget box and tin foil and styrofoam balls from the dollar store. So there you go.
Awesome. And now that like you can get free apps on your phone and stuff like that, people like you see, I'm amazed that like you look at Instagram and seeing how much not only stop motion but really good stop motion being done with very simple things. So
apps help a lot.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite animations that you've ever seen that have influenced you? I mean, there's always a stock answer here and there, but I'm always interested to hear what people have to say, whether it's short films or series or whatever.
I think Chicken Run was very influential to me because I had never worked with plasticine before. And in grade 7, we had to do plasticine as a unit for some reason in art class. And I just made all the characters from Chicken Run. And that is what made me interested in plasticine as a medium for animation. And other than that, I adore anything that Max Winston does, if you're familiar with his work, because he, I feel, stretches the boundaries in a very unique way of what stop motion does. Like if a character is running across a screen, traditionally you would do a character running across the screen, but he'll have the character change into like, I don't know, cubes and hop across the screen. And then they change into like a kid's toy and you still know it's that character before it becomes that traditional molded character again. So he plays with shape and movement in a way that I haven't really seen other people do, because I think most stop motion is people focus on creating these really amazing sets and then animating really smoothly. And I love that. But when Max Winston does something, I'm amazed and it breaks that mold for me every time.
Yeah.
I'm going to do more stuff like that. My attempt in the Silly Duck Wizard was turning them all into those little pom-poms at the end, because the set that I had, so I was using this like scrap of white board that I found in the Sheridan studio, and it was only so big and I couldn't zoom out more, and I wanted all the characters to walk across the stage, but I didn't have more of that stuff and I couldn't find any more, and I didn't want to buy any more because it was poor. So I just was like, all right, I guess I have to make miniature versions. And then I was like, why don't I just make them into pom-poms as representations of themselves? So that's what I did with Max Winston in mind.
Well, yeah, that's a good influence. It kind of keeps you like a little bit more focused on your look and feel and everything like that. So
Yeah.
that's cool. So was Chicken Run basically your first fall in love with stop motion experience?
Oh no, I had seen like Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and King Kong and like all the Wallace and Gromit shorts and Pingu, and like every time I don't know, I just loved stop motion because you knew it was real, and I just loved crafting as well. Just growing up, I always loved making crafts. So it was like this aspirational thing that you could watch and know that somebody had made that. So
Yeah.
I don't know, you asked me, I think I've seen almost every stop motion there is at this point. Now there's so much that I can't keep up, but like from the past, like anything that was online I consumed, or everything that was like on Saturday night at the movies on TVO, which is like Television Ontario. They would play old movies and whatever.
Well, I think on Netflix, they're right now, at least regionally here, they have Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh wow, I gotta watch that. I haven't seen it in a little
I don't even care about the story in those movies. Like they're like okay movies. I just want to see the monsters.
yeah. I'm waiting for that Medusa head or some great it's kind of like, let's get to the, don't bore us, get to the chorus type of thing. Let's see what we're here for. Well, I want to thank you for taking all this time to talk. I'm really excited to see what you've done. I'm like impressed with what you've done. And I just wanted to kind of say as a closing, some of the best artists I know are like janitors or doormen or sanitation workers.
Yeah.
And I feel like I grew up in a culture in Chicago where it was like, have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I know them now, and I would say they're still wonderful artists, probably like literally some of the best artists I've ever seen. Painters, actors, comedians, but they didn't have the support, or they didn't have the environment to thrive. And what you're doing, I think, is really important for students to hear, for artists to hear in general. So I have no doubt that you're going to be successful with what you do, and you've already been successful with what you have been doing. So definitely keep it up. And I look forward to kind of interacting on a creative project and following up with you on what you're doing career-wise and education-wise.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot for me to hear. So I feel good that you said that.
Yeah,
I mean, really, when I'm in the thick of it, like when you say I'm going to be successful, like I hope so.
Well, it's funny. When I was in 7th grade, we had a teacher she was our social studies teacher, but she really didn't talk about social studies. She kind of talked about sociology.
Yeah.
And she asked the class, what is your idea of success? And people were talking about money and vacations and everything. And success is happiness. She said, you guys are all wrong. It's like everyone puts money on success. But if you're not happy, you could be comfortable, but are you happy? And,
for sure. Yeah.
The pursuit of happiness, which is supposed to be the American way. I don't know. It's like, I think
life is just so expensive. And there's such a fear ingrained in us as humans.
Yep.
To be comfortable.
Yeah.
Like just to stay alive, to meet rent or mortgage or whatever, you need a full-time job and to pay your groceries. And like, because you're working all the time, then you want to take a break and you want to be happy with those breaks. So then we invented vacations, and like everything is just money. And you end up in this trap of working to just work more. And it's just how society is set up. I wish we could just be born and not have to toil endlessly to survive, but it's just the reality of how things are. So I think if you realize that you're going to be working the rest of your life, you might as well do it in something that makes you a little bit happy in the process of working. And that's something that I also realized, that if I enjoy the process of doing animation so much, I might as well be doing that every day, regardless of how much money I make, because as long as it's paying the bills, I'll be happy 90% of the time versus, in boredom 90% of the time, waiting for that 10% to pay off. So
working for the weekend versus.
Yeah. And why do you want to work for the weekend? Just work for living and enjoying your week.
Yeah. It's the difference between just surviving and thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody has the opportunity to do that. I know that
Yeah.
I didn't have the opportunity to pursue this when I was younger because, I had to pursue something that would make me stable with income and career for a while to get on my feet. So I don't regret not going into this earlier, but I'm thankful that I had that opportunity and was able to make it in my career to be able to do this now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's a great example, and I wish the best for you, and I expect the best too. So don't let me down.
You as well. Don't let me down either.
Yeah.
So let's keep chatting. I'm really happy that we got to chat on this, and hope you found it insightful. I don't know.
I found it very insightful, and I think it's a good example for people to be out there. It's like you gotta go for it. You gotta go for it. So thank you.
Nice. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, Terry.
Bye.